unfolding global police state of Agenda 21 to impose the society where there are less than 1% have total control over everybody else. That's what's unfolding before our eyes. And this is the point. All these dots are connected. It's the same. People say you see a conspiracy. Everywhere I don't, I see one conspiracy with loads of different expressions of itself. They're stealing our kids with more and more excuses to take children from loving parents through secret fricking courts. 10,000 kids a year are now taken from parents in this country. A vast, vast number of them without merit and without reason. Children stolen by the state needlessly, causing utter misery in one of Britain's most disturbing scandals. Absolutely. That family that took that lad from the cancer unit in that notorious bloody Southampton hospital, they were warned that if they didn't stop asking questions about the treatment, which was shite, then they'd have their children taken away, the child taken away rather till he was 16. This Cinderella law they've introduced is an excuse to take more and more children away from loving parents. Stop the emotional abuse of children. Parents who fail to show love could face prison. This lady, Erin Pitsey, is absolutely right. Why this law against emotional cruelty could turn every parent into a suspect. Who actually decides what that is? The frickin' state does. They're looking for more and more excuses to take children away. Australia government moves to quickly pass laws to sterilise, electroshock and restrain children without parental consent. The Obama youth movement and the seizing of American children is happening everywhere. And there's this bloody idiot, batshit crazy, absolutely. Fine parents who don't read to their children, says Ofsted head, and he wants to punish those who miss school events. Richard Day, schools will become the hub of the community, take over control of kids. Licensing parents being considered by politicians and philosophers. And this is what it's leading to. This is what was talked about by Aldous Huxley in Brave New World, creating a situation where parents had nothing ever to do with procreation and children. Natural reproduction has been done away with, and children are created, decanted, and raised in hatcheries and conditioning centres. From birth, people are genetically designed to fit into one of 5 castes, which are further split into plus and minus members and designed to fulfill predetermined positions within the social and economic strata of the world state. And we're seeing that movement, that totalitarian tiptoe towards that. Political correctness, that's not about protecting minorities from abuse. That's about shutting people up so that they can't criticize anything without being accused of something. It's about silencing people's opinions. Big Brother's here now. Big Brother's here now. Are we going to let him stay? No, we frickin' aren't. Now, let's just got to pull this now into deeper in the rabbit hole. The Archon Matrix, perception control. Control the sea and you control the fish. And that's what this is all about. The energetic field, the cosmic internet, is being polluted on an unprecedented scale by electromagnetic information fields technologically generated. It's coming from broadcast towers, mobile phone towers, Wi-Fi, mobile phones, smart meters, all these things. It's absolutely polluting the very energetic sea that we live in with technologically generated, distorted information fields. And there's a reason for this. They are, I put it here, hacking the hack. I'll say what I mean by that in a second. So anything that says smart in front of it is basically designed to talk and communicate with everything else with smart in front of it. It's the big Agenda 21 code word. Smart, smart this, smart that. Smart drugs use microchips to deliver them. Smart meters are there to put an electromagnetic information field into every home and business, which not only can take information from there to a central point. It can deliver information within the frequency band of human brain activity, and it can insert thoughts and perceptions from a distance. That's the idea. Google Nest now talks to washing machines, lights, and even your car. The idea is to create this global grid, which is basically a sub-reality. It's hacking the hack. It's one level from the fake reality. We're now into a technologically generated fake reality, and thus we are even another step, a big step, from connection to infinite awareness. And this is why Google is Wi-Fi-ing the entire Earth by putting up 180 satellites to put wireless information fields everywhere. It's part of creating this sub-reality, which I'll come to as we go into this final section here. And through entrainment, they can entrain the human organism to tune in, even if they're not in the frequency to start with, and feed them with information and perceptions. These light bulbs, which have and are being by law replacing the ones we had before, are actually shite. Well, most of them are. These are frickin' shite to start with. But it doesn't matter, because that's not what they're there for. They are information transmitters into every home, every business. And that's why they don't just discourage these that have worked perfectly well. They're banning them by law. My flat is full of these frickin' things. I'll have to reincarnate to use most of them, I think. Once I knew they were going to be banned. Hey, target acquired, we've got the bulb. Repeat, we got the bulb. It's madness. But you look at the radiation these things generate and the damage that will do to people and is doing to people. And they've got mercury in them. When they break, mercury is released. And when you look at what the the official things say you should do, it's everything but evacuate the frickin' building. So they've got nothing going for them, but it doesn't matter, because they are transmitters of information. In the 70s and 80s, the Russians were transmitting a signal into America. They called it the woodpecker signal because it went rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat. And these guys, particularly this guy, Dr. Robert Beck, he studied this woodpecker signal to see how it was working. And this is what he told a Psychotronics Association conference back in 1979. He said that human subjects exposed to certain extremely low frequency waves, which is what we're talking about here, field patterns, reported sensations of uneasiness, depression, and foreboding. He said that he had measured the Russian woodpecker signal and found that it was acting like gangbusters right in the window of human psychoactivity. It was coming in on the frequency of human brain activity. The signal was permeating power grids in the United States. It was being picked up by power lines, re-radiated, and it was coming into homes on the light circuits. Now, it was doing that on light circuits that weren't created for that purpose. These new systems, the smart systems, are created to most efficiently deliver information in that way. When I started saying that, people saying that's bloody crazy. Oh, really? Well, now people are getting the internet all over their house through their electrical system. Because electricity is a vehicle for delivering information. And how about this? This very week, from Wi-Fi to Li-Fi. This is a British high-tech startup has invented a light bulb fitting capable of acting as the equivalent of a wireless network in the home. And this is what these smart systems are designed to do. They're sub-realities. They're 24/7 mind control systems. We need to wake up for it. This guy again, Michael Pessinger, said, for the first time in our evolutionary history, we have generated an entire secondary visual, densely complex environment, an electromagnetic soup that essentially overlaps the human nervous system. That's what it's supposed to do. For reasons I'll come to, what they're doing, this archontic force, is they're changing the atmosphere, changing the sources of information that we are receiving, both down here and higher up in the atmosphere, because they are changing our world into their world. FBI will have up to 1/3 of Americans on biometric database by next year. On and on it goes. FBI plans to enlist local cops nationwide in massive DNA collection scheme. And once they have your DNA, they have your unique transmission frequency from that DNA. Surveillance cameras will soon be reading your lips. Lie detection for benefit claimants. Michelle Obama to high school students, monitor your parents for thought crime. Now, all that is to protect us from terrorists. You having a bloody laugh? That is the fast unfolding global police state of Agenda 21 to impose the society where there are less than 1% have total control over everybody else. That's what's unfolding before our eyes. Law they've introduced is an excuse to take more and more children away from loving parents. Stop the emotional abuse of children. Parents who fail to show love could face prison. This lady, Erin Pitsey, is absolutely right. Why this law against emotional cruelty could turn every parent into a suspect. Who actually decides what that is? The frickin' state does. They're looking for more and more excuses to take children away. Australia government moves to quickly pass laws to 1/3 of Americans on biometric data. Will have up to 1/3 of Americans on biometric database by next year. On and on it goes. FBI plans to enlist local cops nationwide in massive DNA collection scheme. And once they have your DNA, they have your unique transmission frequency from that DNA. Surveillance cameras will soon. They knew each other. That's what this section's about, because I'm relating it very much to today. That changed itself just by doing my shirt. That's a miracle. Of course, George Orwell and Aldous Huxley, 1984 and Brave New World, they knew each other. Huxley taught Orwell, real name Eric Blair, French at the elite Eton College, and they were friends, and they had access to this projected agenda. And I've been saying for a long time that Brave New World and 1984 were not from the imagination, not entirely anyway, they were from knowledge of the future. And that's why they've been so prophetic, so amazingly bloody accurate in terms of how things have unfolded. Now, one of the connections they had was into a secret society called the Fabian Society, which is behind things like the creation of the British Labour Party, also very active in Australia, and was behind the London School of Economics and all that. And the Fabian Society has a logo, a wolf in sheep's clothing, which actually gives it all away, really. It doesn't mean if you're in this Fabian Society, you're into the conspiracy, but the inner core knows what's bloody going on. And if you can get into that inner core, you can predict the future, and that's what those two did. Now, it wasn't just a story, 1984, it was knowledge of the future, and that future is now, and that's why so much is coming that he talked about. Now, I'm not going to go through all this, but I will pick ones out as I go through the various subjects. This is another example of this prior knowledge of this projected agenda. This is a guy called Dr. Richard Day. In 1969, he was a Rockefeller insider. He was involved, an executive of Planned Parenthood, which started out as a eugenics operation. I'll mention that as we go through, which again is connected in ways to the Fabian Society. And he stood up in 1969 to a conference of pediatricians in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He asked them to put down their recording equipment and not take notes, because he was going to tell them how the world was going to change. Why this guy did this night, no one seems to know, but he did. And one of the doctors did take notes and did some interviews later, saying what this guy had said in 1969. What he said is the world that is unfolding and we're living in now. And he said it in 1969, which wasn't a kind of million years ahead of 1948 when 1984 came out. But I'll mention some of that as we pick what he said, as I pick out different subjects as I go through. Now, what they are doing is manipulating us to either build or accept the building of our own prison and masquerade it as freedom or protecting us from terrorism and all that shite. And it's systematic. This is a guy called Edward Bernays, and he is known as the father of what we would call today spin, social engineering, manipulating perceptions. And he said, We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested largely by men we have never heard of in almost every act of our daily lives, whether in the sphere of politics or business, in our social conduct or our ethical thinking. We are dominated by the relatively small number of persons who understand the mental processes and social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind. In other words, understand how we create reality and interact with reality, and then download and program your version of reality that you want people to believe. It's systematic. And here is a wonderful example of it, Archon education. If only it was. Control perception and you control reality, and you can get them as young as you can and plant their reality from the earliest possible age. Here we are, buses waiting to take inmates to the programming centres, because that is basically what they are. And teachers overwhelmingly have no idea that that's what they are. They're pawns in the game as well. They are passing on the curriculum and teaching in ways that they are told to teach, which is programming a perception of reality by emphasizing that and ignoring or suppressing alternatives to it. Einstein said brilliantly, everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it is stupid. What schools, what education should be in a natural order world is not how do we get children to be what we want them to be, but how do we get the best and the potential out of every child in their unique sense and unique self. That's what education should be. Capitoline Hill became Capitol Hill when the bloodlines moved in on America. Now, the North Pole, the northern pole of Saturn, is a permanent storm which takes the form of a hexagon. And this has been found by the Cassini spacecraft, and I think the Voyager one before that in the early 80s. And the hexagon also is an expression of the hexagram, or of the six-pointed star, because all these different symbols that I'm going to talk about now are different expressions of the same frequency state. So you look at this crop circle from England this year, and it is a hexagon. But a hexagon is a flattened out cube. So when you look at it from another angle, it's a cube. Well, it just so happens that an ancient symbol of Saturn is the cube, especially the black cube. And I would suggest that's what they are. The Kaaba, the focus of worship in Islam, Kaaba means cube. The tefillin, the cube on the head in Judaism. And when people go to worship around the Kaaba, they're told to pray in concentric circles. Remind you of anything? And they're told to walk around it, and their energy can be trawled. And if you focus on something that represents Saturn, Saturn is where the energy goes. In Judaism, they have Solomon's temple. Every syllable of Solomon means the sun. And the Holy of Holies in the so-called Solomon's temple was supposed to be a cube. They talk in Revelation about the New Jerusalem in cube terms. There's these massive cubes that they use. This is outside the one of the banks near Wall Street, near where the protests are. You see these black cubes and cubes like used by Apple and stuff. Saturn symbolism. In Doctor Who, they had this recent one where the Earth was invaded by black cubes. Star Trek, you had the Borg, who were these cyborg-like, exactly as the are described by the Gnostics of the Archons, and they used to move around in these cubes. If you geometrically represent the cross, then it is a flattened out cube. When you look at the depictions of these people, not Lady Gaga, but others, these religious leaders with the halo, well, that comes from Saturn as well. That halo, when that luminous crescent was in that position. Astrologically, that's the symbol of Saturn. And what they symbolized this as was the sickle and the hammer. And when the Rothschilds created the Soviet Union, provable fact if you look at the evidence, they used the symbol of Saturn as the symbol of the Soviet Union. There's that symbol on this guy from the Brotherhood of Saturn.
The Jesuits are a major secret society in this global network, and there's the symbol of Saturn in their symbolism very bloody clearly. The snake on the cross also relates to this in some ways. Now this is going to take us forward here, because the god of Saturn of the Greeks was called Kronos. And Kronos was, because he was the god Saturn, the sickle, the scythe, was represented as holding the scythe, and also he was depicted as the god of time. And he had the beard, the white beard, and he became Old Father Time. That's Kronos, that's the god of Saturn. He also became the Grim Reaper, because Saturn is the planet, I say, son of death. And Kronos became Crown, a symbol of the bloodlines. Kali, a goddess related to Saturn, it was called the Black One, and the goddess of time, depicted with a protruding tongue. There's Madonna again. I mean, she must have the bloody book she works through, this one. The god El, the Hebrew god El, was their god of Saturn. So El and Elohim are demiurge and archons, I would suggest. So we have archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Uriel, Raphael, another name for Jesus, Emmanuel. We have the Gospels, Chapel, elders, elevated to the priesthood, elections where pawns are elected to serve the elite. We have Isis, Ra, El, all names relating to Saturn. Saturn, Kronos, Satan, Black Sun, Dark Lord, they're all the same thing, the expression of this force. And here you have Moloch, who they worship at Bohemian Grove, and he is a god of Saturn, this recurring theme. They also represent Moloch as a bull, as I said earlier, and so you have that as the symbol of Wall Street. And the golden calf in the Bible is Moloch, Saturn. The Greeks talked about Saturn used to eat his own children. And here's the colours of Satanism and the colours of Saturn, black and red, same as the royal protocol. The robes of the judge, the robes of the clergy, the square hats of the universities, the hammer that the judge uses, it's all Saturn symbolism. You see Saturn profusely used in symbolism of the corporate world. And this earth, wind and fire, they got the bloody set. There's the eye, there's the six-pointed star, there's the step pyramid, there's the winged disc, and there's bloody Saturn. And then, therefore, you look at religions and secret societies and Satanism, they're worshipping Saturn. Then you look astrologically, in other words, energetically. Banking is astrologically ruled by Saturn. Politics and institutions of state at all levels, astrologically ruled by Saturn. Corporations, astrologically ruled by Saturn. Law and court system, astrologically ruled by Saturn. Science, astrologically ruled by Saturn. Saturn worship, Satan worship. And it's interesting that you have the god of Saturn, Kronos, with the beard, and represent, and all these bloody religions, they have bloody beards. And then you have God depicted as a man with a white beard on a cloud or on a throne. And there's God, Charlton Heston type God. That's Yahweh depicted with a beard and stuff. And then we have Santa with the white beard. Santa, anagram of Satan from Saturnalia. Saturnalia was a festival in Rome where they worshipped the god Saturn. And they gave, it was in the same period to the run-up to our Christmas, and they gave gifts, they decorated trees, and they hung sprigs of bloody holly. So that is Saturn symbolism, the man with a white beard. This is Ancient of Days, a painting by William Blake from, I think, 1794 or something like that. Ancient of Days is an old name for God. And he's depicting God. He was a very deep esoteric thinker and great knowledge, William Blake. And he's depicting God with the white beard. That's Saturn, Kronos. On the GE building in the Rockefeller Center in New York, there's Kronos again. Now, the Freemasons, they call their God the great architect of the universe. The demiurge was known by the Gnostics as the great architect of the universe, which brings us to the white-bearded architect of the Matrix, the Matrix movie series. So where is this leading us? Well, again, this needs to go, if we're going to go anywhere with this, because I'm going into fantastic areas here, but this is where the information has taken me very, very clearly. And the hardest thing to see is what is in front of your eyes, as this man rightly said. The Gnostics talked about the fact that the archons make something appear to happen that does not actually happen. They can induce a virtual reality experience. The Islamic people and pre-Islamic people talk about the jinn manipulating humans by creating illusions. I was in New York in 2010, and someone took me to the subway station for Ground Zero. And when I saw it, it was like, whoa, it hit me big time. There was, first of all, this eyes all along the platforms, but there is this massive depiction of the world on the floor, and then there's an eye, and going out from this eye are these broadcast transmissions. And that hit me so powerfully. And Neil Haig was with me, and we kind of looked at each other and said, that's Saturn, isn't it? And remember, physicists have said only this last few days, they may have evidence the universe is a computer simulation. Well, I say that it's a virtual reality, which has been hacked into, and that hack is the reality that we're experiencing, the fake reality. And that hack, I say, comes from Saturn. Because I'm saying that these rings are actually a massive broadcast transmission system, which is so happens that an ancient symbol of Saturn is the cube, especially the black cube. And I would suggest that's what they are. The Kaaba, the focus of worship in Islam, Kaaba means cube. The tefillin, the cube on the head in Judaism. And when people go to worship around the Kaaba, they're told to pray in concentric circles.
For the historical class struggle. He also devoted his first German edition of Das Kapital to Darwin. Engels, who was sort of Marx's handler, I don't think Marx fully understood. Kind of like Engels was to Marx what Thomas Huxley was to Darwin, as Darwin's bulldog, right, his handler. Engels had written that Marx was, quote, simply striving to establish the same gradual process of transformation demonstrated by Darwin in natural history as a law in the social field. Now, whether that's true or not, you know, since the Marxist view does postulate that there are these bursts, these periodic bursts of revolution between the proletariat and the rich, holders of productive enterprises. I don't know if Engels was being all that honest, but the fact that these guys were all basically trying to repackage some core ideas. And the idea of the Fabians was, rather than do things the old-fashioned way, which the British Empire had been doing for, it became really an empire in earnest in the early 1700s. Maybe I'd say even maybe with the advent of the Bank of England after the Glorious Revolution, which involved sort of the deep state of Britain taking full control, and whatever legitimate humanists and nationalists were in Britain formerly were completely destroyed at the end of that process with the death of Queen Anne in 1710 or 1714. But at that point, Britain really became the center control, the hive of this global empire, where it began a process of increasing colonization, the utilization of usury and speculation to undermine its victims. And that process was destructive oftentimes because it necessitated periodic wars, heavy-handed suppression when you had things like, for example, Indians in the crown jewel of the empire, periodically uprising for their rights and freedoms, and then you had to have the British go down and crush them and kill millions periodically just to put them back in their place. It got very messy, and it was risky for the empire itself too, because by having these wars, sometimes it risked the empire losing control of the system that they were trying to manipulate, or themselves getting blown up. So the Fabian Society method, which grew out of a group that was associated with a group called the Fellowship of the New Life, basically another group of British elites trying to create a new religion, a new type of, it sounds kind of innocuous on the surface, like they want a world where our spirits and bodies live in harmony, and a new world that could supersede the Judeo-Christian sort of matrix, utilizing a lot of theosophical Eastern, like a certain version of Eastern mysticism that they're fascinated by, which I don't even think is legitimately Eastern. I think that they're perverting a lot of it. But anyway, that was sort of what people like Alfred Wallace, who co-wrote or was given writing credits for with Darwin, of writing the Origin of Species in 1859. So he was a leading member of that group. And so out of that group came the more practical political aspect, which was the Fabian Society, just 2 years after the Fellowship of the New Life was created. And Beatrice and Sidney Webb were two among the many, as I mentioned a few of them already, eugenicists and social engineers who were like, okay, let's get rid of this old school heavy-handed approach of overt violence to keep control of the empire, and instead let's use something a little bit longer term. Let's have a longer wave approach to history as we permeate slowly and pause, and it will adapt ourselves and infuse ourselves into everything that has influence everywhere in the world possible, and we'll think increasingly transgenerationally. So we need to have more patience. So the term Fabian that they chose, and again, it was created in 1884, was based on the name of a Roman general named Fabius Maximus, who had developed a technique of attrition, basically destroy your enemy, not avoid head-on assaults at all costs, and just simply use attrition. So avoid war, use intrigue and subterfuge as much as possible, cause confusion within your enemy's ranks as possible, but slowly by attrition, when they're weak and they've used up all their supplies, then you can go and attack. You could lay it down. Part of one of the symbols that were crafted by George Bernard Shaw, who I mentioned earlier, was a disgusting, rabid eugenicist who called for periodically forcing everybody in the world to justify their existence under a panel of population control, like a population control panel of experts.
Oh my God. Yeah. I can think of some people today who would love to institute that kind of system.
Unfortunately, yeah, it's a little bit too real. When you listen to the writings of, well, I mean, there's this one guy who was, I think, the first person, they call him Dr. Death, because he was the first person to do
nice.
I think he actually takes pride in it, but I forget his real name. But he was the first doctor to do a legal euthanasia in Europe in 1996.
It begins with a K, doesn't it? I can't remember it.
Yeah, it's escaping me
it's
too.
Right there.
But he called for this horrific idea of like implanting everybody with some poisonous chip, like that has a fluid that would kill you pretty quickly if you cannot press a button at the same time every day.
Yeah,
so that way, if your neurological faculties ever like
start becoming senile, then you just die. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so these guys had this slower idea, but it didn't take off immediately. So that was one sort of, you can consider it an early think tank. And the thing...
The Fabian Society was born in London in the late 19th century. The founding members were a small group of middle-class radicals. These journalists, clerks, and civil servants were restless with the inadequacies of Western society and searching for something new. They wanted to remake the world in a more equitable way, heavily influenced by socialist thinkers of the time.
Treatment center that serviced that population even after he'd propositioned her daughter. The daughter told Cintron to watch out because Heidnik was becoming like, quote, another Jim Jones. Heidnik targeted developmentally delayed women, even camping out near a treatment center that serviced that population, specifically for the purpose of finding new congregants to prey upon. An employee of the Elwyn Institutes in West Philadelphia, a sheltered workshop program for the mentally disabled, told local media that Heidnik had approached her after work one day when she was getting food at the McDonald's next door and began engaging her in conversation. She was holding a baseball card the restaurant had given her as part of a promotion, and Heidnik asked her who the player on the card was. When she answered correctly, he asked a few more questions, and she answered those as well. When it became clear that the woman was not mentally disabled, but rather was an employee of the Elwyn Institutes, Heidnik lost interest completely and ended the conversation. He had been testing her, and the fact that she could answer simple questions correctly had apparently proved to Heidnik that her IQ was too high for a potential victim. As one woman who knew Heidnik and his brother for 7 years put it, he only liked women who, quote, had minds like a box of jello. And this predilection would come back to haunt him. In May of 1978, Heidnik somehow convinced the staff at a mental hospital to let him take one of their patients, a 34-year-old who had, quote, the mind of a 5-year-old, out on a day trip. The woman was actually the cognitively impaired sister of Heidnik's live-in girlfriend, and instead of returning the woman to the institution, he kept her locked in a storage room in his house, subjecting her to 10 days of horrific abuse. After the woman was rescued, Heidnik was convicted of crimes related to the incident in June the same year and sentenced to prison. Gary Heidnik and his brother, Terry, had both been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and Gary had shown signs of severe mental illness from the earliest stages of his life. During his incarceration, he was repeatedly transferred to Farview State Hospital, a state-run psychiatric prison, then called an institution for the criminally insane, to receive treatment before being paroled in 1983. Terry Heidnik would later tell reporters about a conversation he had with his brother during this period. Terry Heidnik said that after Gary's arrest in 1978, he offered to help Gary by taking him away from the city because he was living like a rat. He said his brother's reply made him sick. He said he got caught because the victim got to a telephone and knew where she was at. He said, next time, they won't know where they're at, and I'm going to have a lock on their telephone. I said, wait, we're trying to get you better, and you're talking like you want to get better at not getting caught. Then he said, I'm getting the drift of this thing. I went with a mentally disabled girl, but she could identify me. The next time, she'll have to be blind, so she can't identify me. I walked away from him then. Just 3 years after his release on parole, Gary Heidnik would make good on that promise. Heidnik was, by this time, regularly picking up prostitutes and other vulnerable women from the streets of Philadelphia to bring to